It's John, and happy Thanksgiving weekend to everybody. I figured I'd cover the Thanksgiving games, and I'll cover the rest of the games at some point, probably Friday or Saturday. But anyway, uh, it's an interesting slate of games actually. Two of the teams, the two first games are, in my opinion, and they did this in the NBA last year. I think they had the Celtics and Lakers both playing on, or Celtics Mavs on Christmas or something like that, back to back. They do that kind of stuff a lot. But Cowboys were my original team to make the Super Bowl, and then they started losing. And last week I picked them to lose, and of course they won just because I finally picked them to lose. I still don't think they're going to do anything crazy, but as far as eking into the playoffs, I wouldn't completely rule it out. And then for the Bears, I really thought they'd have a decent year, like 9-8, 10-7. But at the same time, their coach, and I've been saying this since like week 3, is just awful. And then the other team, the Lions, we got the only other team that I think makes sense for the Super Bowl in the NFC right now. They seem obvious, but I'm not buying into the Packers and some of these other teams. I really don't think it's going to be anybody out of the NFC West or South. They could do the Eagles again, but I think it's looking pretty obvious it's going to be the Lions. But anyway, I can cover that at a different time. I want to go into these individual games. Since I just don't believe in this coach, and I believe they have plenty of years to develop Caleb and get this team going. As much as I thought the Bears might make a run, finish 9-8, 10-7, that's basically where I had them all year, and then maybe win a playoff game. I think they're going to just save that for Washington this year, and they're going to get pummeled, the Bears, I think, tomorrow. The biggest reason I think that's going to happen is usually before a coach gets fired, they lose a pretty bad game. And I don't think it's a coincidence that, in my opinion, the most incompetent coach in the league is being matched up against Dan Campbell on Thanksgiving here. Dan Campbell never won a game on Thanksgiving. And to me, I think they're just going to mop the floor with the Bears. Again, they really like to push coaching in the kind of stress how coaching makes a big difference, which it does. But again, I think it's just a scripted league. If you watch the Commanders or the Bears game last week, they're both just asinine. They were going on at the same time and missed extra points, and just the Bears the week before with the blocked field goal. Then they open up that game with a blocked field goal. They get a ridiculous onside kick. They flawlessly run down the field, and then again, just look on Twitter. The coach, is just every week it seems like he finds a way to lose them the game. So I don't think it's going to be a close game. So there's not really going to be a way he's going to find to lose this game. I think they're just going to get completely pummeled. Kind of like how the Lions beat the Cowboys down a couple weeks ago. To me, that's the only thing that makes sense. Again, it establishes the Lions. It gets Matt Eberflus fired for good. There's already talks he's going to be fired. I brought this up again, like back in week 3. And at the time, nobody really said a word about the guy. It wasn't until he started making more blatant errors. I noticed it when he was doing dumb things, like wasting timeouts and bad clock management, throwing it when he should be running it, just basic things. And now it's just so egregious, where he's just, wasting a minute when they could have got a closer field goal a few weeks back. Then last week he goes for it when they're in field goal range. They could have cut it to 4 points. Now it's later in the game and he punts it. It's a bad net on the punt. Like, just basic things, but they're more egregious now. And then obviously the defense, that he ran in overtime got completely shredded. So like, this guy shouldn't be coaching a high school team, in my opinion. That's why I think it's scripted. There's no way this guy would have a job. I genuinely believe I would be a better coach than the guy if this is really, how he coaches, just because, again, it's basic analytics and some of these things that he does. And I don't even watch the full games. I just kind of watch a few drives, and he does something in almost every game within like 5 minutes of me watching. I remember last week, and it wasn't a giant deal, but he wound up, it was like a 4th and 25 for the Vikings, and it was 4th and goal too. So they had to get in the end zone. And there was a penalty on the offense on fourth down would have backed them up and made the field goal about 48 yards. It would be repeat third down, so if they picked up any yards, it would have been closer. But he declined the penalty, and it might not seem like a big deal, but those are the things that I find very odd. Because again, they needed a touchdown, so even if they picked up 20 yards on the next play, they're still kicking a chip shot field goal. Instead, he declines the penalty, which would have moved them back to a 48-yard kick, assuming that the defense held up on the next play. Just little things like that he does. He's done it all year. I think this is going to be the statement game that gets him fired. I could honestly see something like 48-10, and just a complete mauling. And it establishes Dan Campbell as a top coach, which he's been. You can just see the difference in the vibe, the aura between him and Matt Eberflus. So yeah, this one to me is pretty straightforward. Lions just pound the Bears here, break their Thanksgiving streak, and finally the coach gets fired. And then the Bears probably finish the season pretty good. Giants, Cowboys. I'm going to go with the Cowboys to cover. Every week it seems like the Giants are only getting like a couple points, and it doesn't make sense to me. Because as bad as the Cowboys are at home, rush is starting to get going. They just coming off a win against the Commanders. The Giants got mauled by the Bucks. You'd think the Giants would be bigger underdogs. So usually I would see this and it would make me want to pick the Giants. But every time I do, they just get their asses kicked. It's always a prison pounding. So I like the Cowboys. I'll take them to cover. Keep it interesting in the NFC. There's not much more to go into this game because, the coaches are pretty safe, I think. The Giants might do a complete rehaul, but actually, but I see McCarthy seems more like a coach who's going to be fired at the end of the year, whereas Eberflus makes sense to fire him now because, again, then they can pick up players in the free agency and get fans really stoked for Caleb's second year. Whereas the Cowboys, their fans ain't going anywhere. They've been watching, well, I guess the Bears it's the same, but the Cowboys fans been watching basically the same team for decades now. So you can just get rid of the coach the old-fashioned way in the offseason. Bring in a big name, and again, you get their fans hyped. And probably I would think move on from Dak. They might find a way to do that. So yeah, I like the Cowboys to cover here. So I got both home favorites covering in the first two games. And in the third game, I like this straight upset. Last week was a pretty good call on the Dolphins. Basically, only made sense to me that they won pretty decisively, and Tua looked good. And both those things happened. I think Tua threw like 4 touchdowns in like the first half. I don't know how it finished, but he was looking pretty unstoppable. And again, it's only a 3.5 point spread. When you look at these two teams, you think the Packers at home would be a much bigger favorite. But then you remember the Dolphins are a really good team when they're healthy. So, well, notably when Tua is healthy. So, yeah, I think they get the upset. And more importantly, again, the Packers losing here because we know the Lions are winning the division. So the Packers losing here keeps the NFC wildcard way more interesting. It would keep teams like the Cowboys in it. Not saying they're going to do anything, but it would keep the NFC West all tight in it. You'd have a lot of teams vying for those 5 through 7 seeds. And same with the AFC. If the Dolphins improve to 6-6, now all of a sudden they're in there at the Chargers and all these other teams in the AFC. So, yeah, I think it makes all the sense in the world between the spread and the narrative of keeping the Dolphins in it, especially because you got Tua back. Dolphins, I think, win this game straight up. So, yeah, I'd say of the three of them, I probably have the most conviction in order of Dolphins straight up, then the Lions cover, and then third would be the Cowboys cover. The only reason I'm not loving the Lions cover is because, again, it's kind of become part of Matt Eberflus's persona to find a way to blow games. So I feel like there is that outside chance that the Bears have a chance to win the game. Caleb's running down the field, only for Matt Eberflus to completely ruin it. He'll find some new way to blow the game. This guy, again, there's no shortage of ways that he's blown games, and I can see that happening. But again, for this spread to be so big, considering the Bears have been competitive, They've had more like one-score games this year than probably almost any other team. For it to be a 10-point spread tells me that Vegas knows something here. If anything, I think people are going to play the Bears money line, thinking, well, they've been keeping these games close. They could pull it off. It's a divisional game. So yeah, I think most people are going to have money on the Bears, to be honest. So from every angle, I like the Lions. I just wonder if instead of mauling them, they beat them because of a boneheaded coaching decision. But I still like the Lions to cover. And yeah, the Dolphins is probably my favorite play of the three of them. I just think them winning is like, it really makes the most sense. Because again, if they lose and the Packers win, a lot of these playoff matchups are not playoff, but games down the end of the season that are going to determine the playoffs, they kind of go out the door. If the Dolphins are 5-7, they really have no shot, and the Packers are 9-3, basically already secured a spot. So that's kind of how I'm looking at games like that, and for the most part, it's been holding up pretty good. So yeah, definitely worth a three-way parlay. I play them separately, but definitely considering maybe playing. If I did a parlay, I'd probably do it with the Lions cover and the Dolphins. The Cowboys I don't have as much faith in. I could see a win no cover, which actually the Bears covered last week, by the way. And this is like just to show how scripted this stuff is. And they have it down to the number. This was a 2.5 point spread. I think it'll show us. Yeah, you see the check mark. So it was a 2.5 point spread. It actually opened at a 3.5 point spread. This is what you call an old flat fashion clip. So a bunch of people get in, Vikings minus 3.5, and then all of a sudden they move the spread to 2.5. A bunch of people that are probably in the know get in at the 2.5, and all the people that got in when it opened at 3.5 get clipped, because obviously 30 minus 3.5 is 26.5, meaning the Bears covered the opening spread, but not the closing spread. And you see this all the time. You see it with over-unders. You see it with spreads, where they just move a point, and it doesn't really make sense. And of course, it always usually winds up mattering. So I wonder if this game falls exactly at 48 points, because stuff like that happens more than you would think. And again, it just reaffirms my belief that all this is scripted. So yeah. For the playoffs to make any kind of sense, in my opinion, the narrative with Matt Eberflus and the fact that we know they're not going to keep him getting completely mauled, in my opinion, and continuing, I think it'd be a 6-game losing streak or something like that, basically ruining the development of Caleb Williams. I think Caleb's dad has come out against the coach too, if I'm not wrong. So basically everybody's coming out against this guy. His post-game interviews are laughable. Like his decision to challenge that 60-yard pass was he was getting roasted for it, because he's like, yeah, I knew it was a bad challenge. I knew he caught it, and I knew he was in bounds, but it was like a 70-yard play, so we had to challenge it. So he admitted that he basically just challenged it out of passion, kind of like shoving all in a poker game just because you don't want to lose the pot. It was really a ridiculous decision. And you can see here, they're just going into how they've managed to lose all of these games. The fan base is not happy. And I actually think that's why they've been dragging it out, because fans are going to rejoice once he finally gets fired. There's going to be celebrations in the streets of Chicago. And again, it kind of gets the fans hyped for next year when they get a legitimate coach. So I feel like that's what's going to happen here. Yeah, so Lions pummel the Bears. Eberflus probably gets fired. Maybe not on Thanksgiving, that'd be kind of harsh. Giants, Cowboys. So again, of the three of them, the toughest call for me. But I'm liking the under, and I'm liking the Cowboys cover, and then the Dolphins for the upset. Usually you don't get all three favorites to win. Usually there's an outlier. So another reason I think it's a good parlay play. I feel like if the first two hit, just a better chance the Dolphins are going to hit. So happy Thanksgiving, and happy earnings.